Good morning. If you could see us, it would be even better. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and we are midway through prep of week one for the NFL season, and it's time. Hump Day is time to really dive in to this matchup between the Seahawks and the Broncos, and I'm so excited to welcome a first-time guest on this show, Susie Wargin. I butchered her name off the jump. And Susie, I butchered the wrong part of your name. How did I
know. I should have told you how to say Susie, right? It is hard, though. A lot of times people say Susie Wargin, so I get that a lot. It's okay. Wow. When you say it fast, unless you're used to it, it's okay.
We're off to a strong start. And, Susie, you come to me. I got to throw some kudos out from Ariel Orsuto, another challenging name for me first thing in the morning. Ariel came from Denver and is now covering Seattle sports, and I've met her covering the Seahawks. Such a fabulous person, and I think really excited to be here. And she spoke so highly of you when I said, "Hey, who's someone I should talk to on the Denver side to get a perspective?" She's like, "If you can get Susie, then you've done something right." So really appreciate Ariel and appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, she is awesome. I'm super excited that she got the opportunity in Seattle, and she just did great work here in the Denver area, and she's one of my buddies. So she got to do the sidelines for the TV station she was working for here last year, because they locally do the pregame or the preseason games. And so she was on the sidelines with me. So I kind of just dumped all of my 5 years of knowledge on her, and she just like soaked it in and took everything in. And she had graphs going by the end of the 3 games. So she's a hard worker, and I love her to death.
Yeah, she's a pro. She's definitely a pro. And so are you, obviously, sideline reporter for Broncos Radio. You've got the Cut, Traded, Fired, Retired podcast, where you've talked to a bunch of former athletes, coaches, about their experiences. Tell us a little bit about that pod. I was intrigued when I saw that.
Yeah, it's been a really fun project. In our radio company at iHeart, one of the things they're always asking is like, get a podcast, do a podcast. And I could just never think of anything that was original. I feel like everything's been done. So what do you do that's just totally different? And I was listening to one of our competing radio stations that had a couple of guys on it one afternoon as I was driving. And one of them was a former athlete, Tyler Columbus, who has since been fired from that radio station and is on the podcast. But he was telling all of his stories about getting cut. And the other one, the other host, who used to be a former coworker of mine at one of the rock stations here, he said, "Man, that'd be a great book, How I Got Cut." And I was like, oh, light bulb, there we go. And I'm like, well, it can't just be cut. That really limits my pool. So then I was like, cut, traded. And then I went to my program director. He goes, "Well, why don't you do, coaches, and then you could do fired." And I'm like, okay. So first it was just cut, traded, fired. Then I went to Carl Mecklenburg and I said, "Hey, Carl, I got this podcast I want you to be on. It's called Cut, Traded, Fired." He's like, "None of those have ever happened to me, but I'm retired." And I'm like, okay, we're going to add the 4th word. So now I can compass every single thing that can happen to an athlete or a coach. They can be cut, traded, fired, or retired. And they all have some kind of Colorado connection. Most of them. There's a couple special editions in there, but they've either grown up here, went to high school, played college here, or played in the pros here. And it's going through their stories, really, like from the very beginning. How'd they get into sports? What was it like in high school? And some of these guys, they've never talked about kind of their beginnings. And it's so interesting to hear their stories as far as, the colleges they visited, then their travel through the pros. And I think what I've tried to really do that's been cool for me is to humanize the athlete and coach, and just how it's pretty real. When they get traded, we get a press release, but they're on a plane, the next day. And then the wife and the kids are packing up stuff at home. And yeah, they might have some money to have movers, but I don't care how much money you have. It's a pain to do all of that stuff. So it's really interesting to kind of make them be like, hey, you know what, just because they make a lot of money and they have these great abilities, they still have problems and they still go through stuff. And then they're done in 5, 6, if they're lucky, 5 or 6 years. Some get to 12 or so. And then what do? Where do they find that rush? You can't find it anywhere else. So then it's the reinvention. And I think a lot of us in life go through a reinvention. I'm certainly not doing the same thing when I was 22 as I'm doing now at 54. And so it's kind of cool to go through that, I think, to figure out what did they do? How did they reinvent themselves? And what kind of gives them happiness as they go through life?
I find that fascinating because I mean, I've done, I worked in the tech industry for a long time before I, full-time cut over to covering the Seahawks this year. And I've also done a pod about just different career decisions people have made. And there's absolutely this relationship people have between work where it's not that different in some ways than dating, where, you like them, they like you, and you kind of have that back and forth. And then it's who's gonna break it up first, and who like there's jilted, like there's a whole back and forth and dynamics there that when you get traded, when you get drafted, when you get cut, all these different things, it's hard to have that professional relationship be that tenuous and to be a professional throughout it. So that sounds fascinating. I will definitely have to check it out. Although Carl Mecklenburg brings back some bad memories as a Seahawks fan.
Back when we were all in the AFC West together, right?
Yeah, let's start there. So we were all in the AFC West together. I'm old enough to remember that.
Same. I grew up that way too. Seahawks were a big deal back then.
Well, and so I'm curious from a Denver perspective, how do Denver fans see Seattle? Because back then, Seattle was kind of, always in the middle of the ground. They were very rarely like a division winner. John Elway was there and dominant, and the Chiefs had, a lot of teams that are pretty dominant. So I always thought of the Denver fans would think of Seattle like a little brother, like not that intimidating, but like how much of a rivalry is it from a Denver perspective?
It's interesting because, like you said, I can remember that growing up. One of the kids I grew up on a cul-de-sac that was all boys. And so I would play football and basketball with them. I'd always show up to all their stuff, which they hated, but I still did. But one of them was a diehard Seahawks fan. So I heard about the Seahawks nonstop, but I think that we did think that, every once in a while they might sneak in and get one from us. But in fact, I was looking at the printout. Where's our printout of the all-time record between Broncos and Seahawks? We lead the series 35-20. So there were many years where Denver won. And, I think at that point in the 70s and 80s, our rival was by far the Raiders. I mean, that was like the biggest. And I think that was the same thing for the Seahawks as well. The Raiders were just the hated team in our division. And the Chiefs were too. And especially as they got better throughout the years and got more players. But I think you're right. The Seahawks and the Chargers, for that matter, were just kind of like, oh, they're the cute ones that we play twice a year. And, usually beat them, but every once in a while they got one. So, but I think right now, Brian, especially as we look to this Sunday and what happened 2 years ago on September 12th, 2022, I think there is a big want here in Denver to go there and be like, okay, clean slate. We've got Bo Nix now. We don't have Russell. I mean, I was there for that game, and that was wild. I mean, and we were just getting exposed to Russ because he didn't play that entire preseason. That was the first time we got to see him play. Mm-hmm. And it was when we were all kind of starting to hear the rumors about, hey, Russ has this contingent of people that are around him. He had these two personal physical therapists that were always there. That were in Broncos gear. He had his own photographer. I mean, he had a team of people. I'm like, where do these people come from? They're like, oh, that's part of Russ's team. And I'm like, wait, do they help anybody else or just him? And it's just him. So we were really trying to figure out, okay, who's Russ? What's he made of? And then as I watched that game transpire, and I was standing right there when I saw Brandon McManus go to Nathaniel Hackett and tell him, get over to the left side. I can make it from, 64.5. And that's exactly where they got it to. And he missed. And it was just and then that season, I mean, from that point on, it was just like, oh, wow, we just paid this guy so much money. And this just happened? We scored 16 points? Are you kidding me? It's supposed to be like the big coming out and going back to Seattle. So I think this Sunday, man, it's so different. I mean, we've got barely anybody left over from that team from a couple of years ago. And then just an entirely different coaching staff, and everything is very different. We're very excited about the Bo Nix era and hoping that that's going to take us places. So there's renewed hope in Broncos country that we just have not felt for a couple of years.
Yeah, and in that game, it's interesting you start there because obviously the Russell Wilson trade was tectonic for both franchises. And in that game, Russ threw for 340 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. He had I'm looking at now, 101 passer rating. They lost, but I would think Broncos fans weren't looking at that game as like, oh man, we're screwed. It was later as that season progressed that I think that started to become a concern. And I wonder, just taking it back a little farther for a second, like that was obviously a big moment. The Super Bowl was obviously a big moment.
Yeah.
And so for me, I will just speak for me. I can't speak for other Seahawks fans. It was Denver who was my most hated rival within the AFC West.
Interesting.
And I think there's a number of Seahawks fans that kind of had that feeling with Denver. The Raiders were certainly up there as well for folks, but it tends to go with whoever's the best team. And a lot of times Denver was the best team in that division.
Absolutely. No, and I get that because, I went to Colorado State and our rival, we think, is CU. And the big showdown's coming up in a couple of weeks, a week from this Saturday. CU doesn't consider us their rival. Yeah. We're like the little brother, and we're like, no, we're your rivals. And they're like, no, you're not. Nebraska's our rival, or, whoever is. So it's interesting you say that, because I could see that, especially if you feel like you get treated like the little brother, you're going to be ticked off.
Yeah. Well, and so that's, you talked about the Wilson trade. How much did the Super Bowl stoke any, animosity or ill feelings? And then the Russell trade after that. Is Seattle a team among the NFL that Broncos fans have different feelings about than other teams because of those?
Probably. And honestly, Brian, I think the Russell thing is what burns people here more than anything else than Super Bowl 48, because we got to erase that icky memory with Super Bowl 50 with the win. So, we'll look back on that one and go, and it was doomed from the start. The very first play, it was horrific there in New York. So I think people just kind of, gladly forget about that. And we put it in the back of our memory because we got a great win against the Panthers in Super Bowl 50. So I think the Russell Wilson thing is what really chaps people the most. And just, a lot of people be like, hey, we felt like we got, damaged goods, or we didn't get what was advertised. But honestly, you could see it. And you heard the things. Like, I remember when I'd hear Russ on the Dan Patrick show and he'd say, I feel like I need more input. I want this. And Seattle's like, no. And so I'm like, well, I wonder why Russ can't have more input. And then, then when he gets to a place, and I wonder how, Pittsburgh fans are all like, yay, we got Russell Wilson. And I'm like, I hope it works out for you, because Seattle knows, and now we know that he's just, and God bless him. Not a mean bone in his body. He is the nicest guy in the world. Yeah. Sierra's very nice. They were always super kind and everything. But I just feel like there's some pieces missing, where sometimes he can't read the room. He's hard to relate to with teammates. And there's just some things there. Obviously very talented, has been talented in the past. And after this game, we got Pittsburgh coming in here. That's our first home game after the Seahawks game. Wow. So we've got 2 weeks of let's get it together, because we got to show some people some things.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fascinating storyline. So then talk about how the vibes are around Denver with this Broncos team. What are people, how good do people think this team is? Are they thinking they could contend for division, or are they just hoping that Bo Nix has a good year? What's kind of the range of expectations for this team?
All of the above, Brian. No, I do think that, the over under going into preseason was 5.5. And I think a lot of people are like, 5.5, we're going to win more than 5.5. And I'll tell you what, after watching the preseason, if that was any indication, I'm well over the 5.5. I also bleed orange and blue, and I'm a diehard fan as well as reporting, but I also get a different vibe this year on the sidelines than I have in the past few years, just because we've had a good defense the last few years, even with the Vic Fangio time, and he was a defensive guy. We had good defenses, and the offense just couldn't keep up. And defenses get tired of that. They'll never say that. None of our guys ever said anything, but you can tell in body language. You can tell when they sit on the bench and they're just watching the game on the Jumbotron going, all right, how soon are we going to go back in? Because they're going to, we're going 3 and out and we're done. But this time, even in preseason, and it was interesting because Sean mentioned it after the game to Dave Logan, our play-by-play guy, where he said, I liked the energy. Like there were a bunch of starters that didn't dress that third preseason, and they were all standing. None of them were sitting down. They were watching the game. They were involved. When somebody made a great play, they were all out there to greet him. So he said, and I had noticed this, I'm like, this is a different support than I've seen in the last few years between offense and defense and just everybody in general, special teams as well. And Sean said it. He said, I really like the energy, especially from the guys that weren't starting. And that's exactly what I've seen. And I've asked some of the offensive guys about that. I'm like, are you feeling it like in your rooms, in your wide receiver room, in your running backs room, in your tight ends room? Are you feeling a different vibe? Because I feel it, and I'm not in there, but I just see it on the sidelines. And I've seen it at preseason too, or in practice too, at training camp, where it just feels different. The defense, I'm not worried about. Those guys are tight. You know, we lost a couple of guys, but Alex Singleton, he can take over as the main guy there. He's calling the plays anyway when we lost Josie Jewell, one of our linebackers. And so I don't worry about them. Pat Surtain is just unbelievable. He's a quiet guy, but is understanding that he's got younger guys now underneath him that he needs to coach and help and help bring along to bring him up. We know he's going to be his level, but get them up there to be able to compete, because guys aren't going to throw his way. They're going to throw everybody else's way. So, so it's different, Brian. And I can't put my finger on it except to say that it's better. It's a better different. They're more cohesive. And I feel like they're just really on it. It's crazy. I love it.
Yeah, well, speaking of Pat Surtain, news there, he got a big new extension today. So congratulations to him.
Yeah.
And he's got a tough matchup. I'm sure people think it's the opposite in Denver, and I think that's fair. He's known as an elite corner. Seahawks feel pretty good about their receiver trio, or even really their receiver quintet. So speaking of that, the Broncos last year were dead last in the NFL in defending teams' second wide receivers. They were dead last in the NFL in defending other teams' tight ends. Riley Moss now takes over opposite of Surtain. They've got, Justin Simmons isn't back there at safety anymore. They've got Jones. They got him from Miami. I'm curious, like, outside of Surtain, how do Broncos folks feel about that secondary? Can they hold up against a high-powered passing offense?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. Guys that we are very excited about, as you mentioned, Riley Moss and also Jaquan McMillan. Very excited about J-Mac. And I think he can do some great things. Levi Wallace did some good things in preseason. So there's a good group back there. And if Pat does take these guys under his wing, Jaquan showed some great things last year. So looking forward to seeing what he can do this year. I think they can hold their own. And I think my hope is that those guys, even though they're not as well known and quarterbacks might try to throw their way, they can make some plays. And then they're going to be like, oh, maybe we can't just work, this side and not go Pat's way. And then they're going to have to go Pat's way sometimes. And he's going to just do what he does and school them. So that's the hope anyway. We are really going to miss Justin Simmons, though. He was just one of those guys, and he was kind of one of my go-tos always, too. I mean, he'd been around for a long time. When we'd lose a game, I need to get interviews after the game in the locker room, and he was a guy I could always go to that would always give me, something, and was just that dude. So we're definitely missing him this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, talk about the offensive line, if you would, a little bit, because another guy that left was Lloyd Cushenberry, who's a very talented center, and you've got Luke Wattenberg stepping in there, who played guard last year sparingly. The other part of the line is relatively well known. Quinn Minor's got a big deal. Garrett Bowles is well known. McClinchy is known even from his NFC West days with the 49ers. So how is Wattenberg looking at center?
He's looking good. He and Alex Forsythe both, kind of switched off a little bit, especially in the first, I want to say that first preseason game. Maybe it was the second one. There was one time when Bo Nix, when Alex was at center and Bo Nix took a snap and they kind of fumbled the snap. And then I watched them during an entire defensive series just practice. snapping the ball. And that was with Alex before Luke was named the starter. So Luke's been a very solid lineman. And I think he proved himself to Sean Payton during the preseason that he can be the guy, but we do have a good solid backup with Alex there. And then the rest of the line, I mean, Garrett's been, I think he might be our guy that's been around the longest now that we don't have Justin here. Love Mike McGlinchey. I love him as a person. He's another one of my go-to guys. That's just a great guy. Sometimes kind of gets caught with the penalties a little bit with getting off a little bit early. But as long as we can keep that line penalty free, as much penalty free as possible, because that's our problem sometimes. And we've had that bite us so many times where we get a playoff, we get a great run, and then there's holding, and then and it's just, and things come back, and that's where the defense gets really tired of all those penalty calls. And that's something that's a huge focus this year for Sean. I mean, I think every coach says it every year. We've got to hold our penalties down, but in particular with that line and making sure that they don't commit stupid penalties. Don't do things that are there's penalties on every single play. Just don't get caught. Easier said than done, right?
Yes. Well, so a couple more questions. This is Susie Wargin. Did I nail it that time?
You did. You got it.
I need nice the validation. Job. Thank you, Susie. Let's talk about a couple other things, and then I'll just let you get on with your day. One, like every fan base kind of feels hope at this point in the season, but they also know where their potential weaknesses are. And so from a Seahawks perspective, the offensive line is a group that has not yet proven itself, and the Broncos have a good array of pass rushers. So that's a place that, as a Seahawks fan, I would have some questions about how that's going to go. And then also the Seahawks run defense has not done well the last few years, and the Broncos have a very strong run blocking offensive line and a pair of good running backs, plus a quarterback who can use his legs. So those are the two places that for me stand out as potential places where the Broncos could have some advantage. When Broncos fans look at the Seahawks, do you have a feeling, or like when Broncos fans look at the Broncos, where are some of the areas where you feel like, I hope this doesn't rear its head in this game?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think right now we're all feeling very good. You come out of preseason 3-0, right? And you're like, all right, everything's awesome. But I think, like I just mentioned, the penalties, that's a group as a whole, just making sure that you don't do dumb things. You don't have 12 men on the field. You don't have, we had that happen one time and Sean loses his mind when stuff like that happens. So, don't do things like that. If I were to say anything offensively, I am a little concerned, but hopefully won't be, about our wide receiver group since they traded Tim Patrick. That was a huge surprise that they got rid of Tim, because we thought, all right, we've got these two big bodies in Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick, and then they trade Tim, and I'm like, ooh, dang, okay. So, but they also, I'm hoping that they see a lot more than we do, and they know what they're doing, and they did it for a reason, and maybe that won't be a problem, and we'll have other guys that are going to step up and do a lot of great things. We didn't see as much from Troy Franklin in preseason as I'd hoped that we would, since he and Bo were teammates in college, but maybe we'll start to see more of that. Josh Reynolds is very solid. Marvin Mims, and then Devon Bailey too. So we'll have to see. There's a bunch of names that people haven't heard of before, and maybe they're going to surprise a lot of people. And then at running back, you mentioned we do have good backs. My hope is that Javonte Williams is, he lost some weight in the offseason. He's looking quicker and did very well in preseason. We didn't see a ton of him in preseason. So I'm hoping that Javonte is able to get in there and really make some moves. We were surprised that they got rid of Samaje Perine too, because Samaje is a guy who could just go in there and on a third down, grab that first down, get a few more yards, and now he's gone. So there's some question marks there with what they had to do to get down to the 53. It's nice with the new practice squad rules now that we're able to, Michael Burton is a fullback, which a lot of teams don't actually have a fullback, but he's amazing. He's just this bowling ball that can go in there. They cut him. He's on the practice squad. They can do that elevation thing for 4 games. So we'll see how they work the system, and maybe it'll work out to where we can kind of keep some guys in and out, and then injuries happen, and then you make guys on the active roster because you got to put guys on IR or send somebody else down to practice squad. So it's going to be an interesting month to see how they kind of work all that and see how this offense does without a couple of pieces that a lot of us were surprised to see go. But they're also deep. So maybe we're going to be okay.
All right. You've seen a lot of quarterbacks come through in Denver, and it's been
since Peyton. Yeah.
I mean, it's been a lot. And I'm curious, you see Bo Nix, obviously there's a lot of excitement in Denver. How do you compare him and what you've seen of him so far compared to some of the quarterbacks you've seen come out? What stands out about him?
He's impressive, Brian. And I think one of the things that's most impressive is his poise. Everybody talks about his maturity and just kind of, he's been knocked down already. When he went to Auburn, it didn't go very well. And he left Auburn. And so he's already been through, he hasn't been at the top winning all the time. Everything's roses and rainbows. So I like that he's been humbled, has come back to have great success. He's married. He's bought a house here. He doesn't have a whole bunch of other distractions. There's a lot of rookies that'll come in at 21, 22, ton of money, ton of Klinger honors, ton of people that want to tell them how to run their world, and they're just not focused whatsoever. This guy is unreal and very focused. I was fortunate enough, the Broncos PR staff had me come in and do a chat, little quick 15-minute with all the rookies before the preseason started, and just kind of explain, hey, here's, we're really nice here in Denver. We can help you out as much as you help us out, and just a few things like that. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, hey, thanks for coming in today. And I was like, wow. He was the only one that came up to me. No, I should take that back. One of the Air Force guys came up to me as well because he wanted to know about our son who's in the Air Force. But I was impressed. I'm like, he didn't need to do that. He didn't have to come up and say thanks for coming in for 15 minutes and chatting about all the stuff that he probably already knows because he's been around the media so much. But I was just like, I like that. I watch him and I see how he interacts with teammates, the quarterback trio there with Jared Stidham and Zach Wilson. Thank you. They're very tight, and it's interesting to watch the three of them because I was like, man, I don't know, that's why I wasn't too surprised they kept all three because they're a really good room. And I think that Stiddy and Zach offered very different skill sets that if something, God forbid, happened to Bo, or they need to, take him out and do something, for a play or two, they each offer different stuff. And so I think that it's cool to be able to have both of them to be able to do that. And I think Zach impressed everybody way more than they thought he would in training camp and preseason.
All right. So rookie quarterback coming in, first game in Lumen Field against the Seahawks, who most people in the NFL are not necessarily highly regarding the Seahawks or the Broncos for that matter. How do you expect this game to unfold, Susie? First game, how do Broncos fans expect this game to unfold?
Well, I'm going to say with a win, Brian, of course, but I do think that it's going to be interesting. They're going to work on crowd noise because we know Lumen Field is unbelievably loud. I have to, I've got a little IFB that sits in my ear, and there's times where I can't hear anything, and I've got to really crank up my IFB to be able to hear. So it is the loud factor is definitely a thing, and so they'll work on that this week. They did a little bit during training camp. In fact, I was conducting one of my pregame interviews with one of the Broncos front office people, and we were outside, and all of a sudden it just started blaring, and so we had to go inside to finish it. And I'm like, oh, we're getting ready for Seattle, I see. So that's going to be a factor, but he's also played in front of big, huge crowds. He's played, in very loud stadiums. He's not coming from a school that, couldn't fill the stadium. That's for sure. So he knows that pressure, he knows that kind of, intense crowd and whatnot. So, maybe there's going to be some butterflies, but he doesn't strike me as a butterfly guy. If he has them, you would never know. He is like that. Just kind of, he is the coolest cat out there. I think just steady and business. And to me, I think it's going to go great. May have a couple little things here and there, but I don't think he's going to skip a beat. It's pretty amazing.
It'll be interesting to see for sure. Any injury news that Broncos fans are watching for this game?
We don't have a whole lot going on. I need to look at my pages because we had, Damari Mathis went on IR. He was in that last preseason game.
Jones, the safety, I think has missed a few, but maybe he's expected.
Yes, he has. And it's going to be interesting to see if he comes and does anything. But as of right now, they haven't put anything out. They'll put out their first injury report today. Mm-hmm. So we'll get something on that today. So I'll be curious to see who's on there after not having had anything. Well, they never put any injury reports out in the preseason, but I've just kind of I keep my notes on them during the game. So yeah, we'll see, but nothing big, nothing to any key players, which is good.
That's what I thought. So, Susie, thank you so much for coming on. This is Susie Wargin from Broncos Radio, covers the team obviously excellently. If you haven't seen or heard her, you should. Make sure you check out the Cut, Traded, Fired, Retired podcast. We'll see what else gets added to that name next. But I'll make sure to add the link to that podcast to the description of this video for people that want to find it. Susie, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you having me.
All right. That is Susie Wargin from Broncos Radio. Great to get to know Susie and hear a little bit from the Broncos perspective. I mean, this is a team and a franchise that the Seahawks have a rich history with. And, I think the Seahawks have been the little brother for the Broncos when they were back in the AFC West. And, then, the Super Bowl was a big moment, and interesting to hear from Susie that isn't even the thing that really sticks in Broncos fans' craw so much. It's the Russell Wilson trade. So, it's also funny there because Seahawks fans know that after the Russell Wilson trade, all we heard from Broncos fans was how they completely clowned us on that trade and how they took our franchise quarterback and enjoyed being in quarterback purgatory for all those years after we made the trade. And obviously it didn't work out that way. I mean, Seahawks fans are quite happy with Geno Smith and what's transpired there. And the Broncos have already moved on from Russell Wilson, despite the fact that they're going to be paying him a significant chunk of change for a while. So it's really been a transformative moment for both franchises. And then having, a couple years ago after that trade, I mean, amazingly having the Broncos start their season in Seattle and losing that game, in a game that Russ played reasonably well. And then again, 2 years later, after Russell's gone, starting the season in Seattle with a new rookie quarterback. And Russell's going to be coming. They're going to be playing them the week 2. That is a fascinating start. The NFL schedule makers did something kind of interesting there. No doubt about it. So I will do my best after this show to put in chapters. I'm going to try to start doing this as much as I can to the description of the video so that you guys can skip around a little bit easier or more easily to find different parts of the show. But that is kind of part 1 of this episode for Hump Day, because part 2 is we're going to go into the tail of the tape in more detail. I gave you a first look at the Broncos on Monday, and we went in there. I gave you some initial views of what's going on. I published last night at hawkblogger.com my tail of the tape article that went into more details about this matchup, and we're going to go through that. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm also going to probably nose around different sites when I have some questions about this. So I don't know how long this will end up going. Just warning you here, I'm going to satisfy my own curiosity. And if you want to be curious with me, feel free to do it. But this is the day each week of this season. Wednesday will be a day where we dive in more deeply to this matchup. Not only that, but it is a double pod Wednesday. At a minimum, there might be a triple pod. We'll see. But Real Hawk Talk will be tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Dana O'Gorman and Nathaniel Ernst. Did I just say Nathaniel Ernst? I'm going to call him that from now on. No, it's Nathan Ernst. Will be on with me tonight at 6 o'clock to get their perspectives on this game and to put our score predictions on the record. So be sure to check that out. Also, if you haven't already noticed, there is a chat party set up for the game this weekend. I will kick it off from my phone. I will not be in there participating, but it's members only. You have to be a member to participate in that chat, because that means there'll be no spam. That means that there'll be hopefully no trolls. So absolutely enjoy that as a member. It's a good time to join as a member if you haven't already. There's been so many amazing gifted memberships. Detail-oriented, Bobby, please don't take that as a sign to gift more memberships. You've done more than enough. Take care of yourself, buddy. But he gave away another 50. I think it was yesterday. So, and a bunch of other folks have been gifting memberships. So make sure you have membership gifting turned on if you haven't already. Yeah, that's going to be great. I also want to sneak for you guys that Evan, Jeff, and myself are going to do a pregame show Sunday. It is going to be a really weird pregame show. We will probably be out on the Seattle streets waiting to get into our bar for 10 a.m. games. And we'll figure out how to do a pregame show, Jeff, Evan, and myself. This will be prior to when we will be drinking, so we'll at least be sober. But it will be interesting. There'll be a lot of vibes going on day of the game. So I've not yet put that up on the channel, but keep an eye out for that. It will be a fun way. That will be Hawk Blogger Mornings, at least this Sunday. To keep the streak going, we will do a little pregame show. We generally also do a postgame show. So we'll figure all that out. This is my first time through a game week when I'm doing shows every single day. So figuring out the timing of all this is going to be fascinating. And let's just hope my wife still lets me in the house after Sunday. All right, so let's talk about this matchup. So tail of the tape. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to figure out if this is a good way to do this or not. But let's go ahead and push this up here. This is hawkblogger.com, so shouldn't be a big shock for anybody here. But I want to get to the visuals. So First, DVOA. So I've been talking about it, and I know everyone's like, this is just an advertisement. I mean, it is, but it's not. This is information that I've looked at for a decade plus, and the fact that it happens to be on ftnfantasy.com, the fact that FTN Fantasy was my first sponsor on this show and partner on this show. The fact that FTN Fantasy is giving everybody 15% off with promo code Hawks. And we've got a bunch of people signing up and getting access to this data. That's all just like goodness. I'm going to look at this every week, and I want to give folks an insight into how DVOA looks at this matchup. Now, all of this data that I'm going to be showing you is last year's data. It's 2023. And there is this aspect here where some people are like, hey, who cares about 2023 data? These are different teams, different coaches, different everything. It's not different everything. And just so you all know, just as a reminder, the way that Vegas sets over under for win totals, the way that they set odds for the first week of the season that a lot of money is riding on, has to do significantly with last year's data. If you remember 538 for a while, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they would do power rankings, and they would do something called ELO. And that had to do with how good a team was the year before, because they found statistically that the performance of a team in the prior year actually does have efficacy in predicting how the team will do the next year. It's not going to be exact, but there are things you can learn, at least knowing where things ended last year, before you get into figuring out, what the reality is for this year. All right. While I was blabbing there, we got an awesome gift from Isaac. Gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. He has been absolutely going crazy with this lately. Isaac, thank you so much, man. You are a great member of the community. Really, really appreciate you. And thank you for helping to expand the kind of community here. And just like that, Italian Knight 78 gifts 5 more. So if you do not have gifting turned on for your membership, you really want to do it, because you could absolutely just turn it on and get a free membership right there. I've seen it happen from multiple people. And so make sure if you do get a free membership, really think about paying it forward, like folks like Italian Night, like folks like Isaac, help bring in other cool people, happy people, friendly people to the community. All right. So what are we looking at here? Courtesy of ftnfantasy.com, promo code Hawks for that 15%. For total DVOA last year, the Broncos are in this left column, the Seahawks are in the right. So the Broncos were 24th in DVOA. Now, what is DVOA? I'll give you a very quick DVOA primer. DVOA takes into account opponents. It takes into account how you played relative to expectations. And it also, for like offense and defense, it takes into account like how good of a defense did you face? How good of an offense did you face when you did something? So if you score 50 points against the worst defense in the league, you're going to get lower DVOA credit for that than if you scored 50 points against the top defense in the league. So it's opponent adjusted is what OA stands for. And that's part of what makes DVOA a really interesting kind of weighted number or ranking to look at. So based off who they played and how they played, the Broncos were the 24th ranked team in the NFL last year. The Seahawks were 16th. They were really essentially where they finished, 16th in the league, had the 16th pick. What have we talked about so much? The Seahawks were a mid franchise, or a mid team for the last few years. They defined mid in a lot of ways last season. When you break it down, you start looking at the Denver offense versus the Seattle defense. What were the rankings there from a DVOA perspective? So the Broncos had the 19th ranked offense. The Seahawks had the 28th ranked defense. So what you see here in the advantage is I'm basically giving you a visual cue about where there's an advantage for one team to the other. Green is good, red is bad if you're a Seahawks fan. So yes, these are 23 rankings. I see a question from Zach on chat. I'll just clarify that again. All of these are going to be 2023 rankings. And yes, those are relevant. I will continue to tell you they are relevant. Doesn't mean that they're going to be the same team, but it is absolutely, there's evidence that where you finished last year has some predictability to where you will be the following year. Run offense for the Denver. So I'm going to break it down even further. So there's DVOA for run offense and pass offense. Well, the Broncos run offense is what I've been telling folks, 13th in the NFL. That was one of their best parts of their team last year. And they bring back, you say, how much does last year have to do with this year? Well, everyone but Lloyd Cushenberry is back as part of that run offense, including the coaching staff. So this is I wouldn't say it's a formidable run offense, but it was a reasonably effective run offense. And now you add Bo Nix to that rushing offense. I think the Broncos could be a top 10 rush offense this year. That's not a crazy thing. And the Seahawks run defense last year was 25th. So like it or not, the Seahawks, that is probably, everyone talks about the offensive line. I'm telling you, the run defense is one of the biggest areas of question for the Seahawks. I'm glad they added Jonathan Hankins. I'm glad Adam Dirty feels good about bringing him and recruited him. I got to see it in action. Jonathan Hankins, not highly thought of by PFF at this point. He used to be back in his Giants days years ago, has not been highly graded. He is older. I want to see that he makes a difference in the middle of the line. I want to see that these linebackers can be good in run support. I want to see that Tariq Woolen can be a better run defender. I think he can, but all of these things are question marks. So this line for me, Denver's run offense versus Seahawks run defense, is one of the biggest storylines for this game. Next, you got the Denver pass offense versus Seattle pass defense. And by the way, I'm not going to go through every line of this, but for DVOA, I do want to touch on each of these because I think it's particularly interesting. So Denver's pass offense was ranked 19th. Seattle's pass offense was ranked 19th. Seattle's pass defense was ranked 28th. So again, like a lot of people are like, well, the run defense was awful, but the pass defense was not much better. The Seahawks gave up a ton of explosive plays. We'll talk about that. You'll see it in some later charts that I've got, some tables I've got. But I'm not as concerned about this for a lot of reasons. But I'm not concerned about the Broncos from a threat perspective and a weapon perspective. I'm not in the pass game, and I'm not as concerned about the Seahawks secondary in terms of defending the pass. So I think we're in decent shape there. When you look at the Denver defense versus the Seattle offense, people forget the Seahawks offense was 12th in DVOA last year, nearly a top 10 offense overall, and the Broncos defense was 30th. The run offense for the Seahawks, 18th, not great, bottom half of the league. That to me is another big storyline for this year. We talk so much about Ryan Grubb in the passing game. Scott Huff, Ryan Grubb, this team, Mike McDonald, they want to be able to run the ball effectively. They didn't do that last year often enough. They go against a Denver run defense that was 31st in run DVOA last year. They brought in some guys, Malcolm Roach from New Orleans. They brought in the guy from the Jets, who I'm forgetting at the moment. He's got a hyphenated last name, but they've got some guys, and then DJ Jones is their nose tackle. John Franklin Myers is the guy. Sorry, forgot his name for a second. So they've made some changes. I'm not convinced Cody Barton and Alex Singleton and that defensive line has gotten that much better, and they blitz a lot. So I think that there's going to be opportunities for Kenneth Walker to pop a big one, to have an explosive play. When you look at Denver's pass defense versus Seattle's pass offense from last year, the Seahawks pass offense was 6th in the NFL last year. Do people know that? I was surprised to see that. 6th overall in DVOA for the pass offense last year for Seattle. Denver's pass defense was 25th. So Denver's defense was quite bad last year. I'm just not convinced that it's that much better from a back seven perspective, linebackers and secondary. Special teams DVOA, one of the things to pay attention to there, I'll show you a little bit more on this, is both these teams were pretty good on specials in terms of coverage, in terms of punting, all that in terms of return game. As much as I was not a big fan of DJ Dallas as a returner, the Seahawks were, you'll see this later, pretty highly ranked as a return team. The other piece that I wanted to call out here as far as last things on DVOA, and I mentioned this when we were talking with Susie here a little bit ago, but the Broncos really struggled in defending everybody in the pass game. But even Pat Surtain, who should be the guy defending number one wide receivers, he was a middling player, cornerback in DVOA as an individual defender last year. I got that in talking to Aaron Schatz. The team was 24th in DVOA against number one receivers, 32nd, dead last against wide receiver twos. They go from Fabian Moreau to Riley Moss as the second corner. I have real questions about that. Defending wide receiver 3, they were 20th. Defending tight ends, they were dead last, 32nd. Defending running backs, they were 16th. So this just wasn't a good defense. It was not a sound defense in defending the pass. The Seahawks, this is the one part of this chart that bothers me because it's not really against. This is how the Seahawks defended wide receiver 1s, 2s, 3s, tight ends. It's not the offense. So a little misleading, but the Seahawks were better in all of these regards, although they were not very good in defending wide receiver 2 last year. 30th out of 32 teams. So that's worth noting. They also struggle with the tight end. They were 24th in the NFL in defending tight ends. I don't think that tight end is an area of particular concern in this game. So as I kind of keep going, a couple other things. This is looking at the Seahawks offense in a little bit more detail. And again, I'm not going to go through every row here. I'm going to call out a few things that I didn't talk about on Monday. So I added EPA per play, expected points added. This is the stat du jour of the analytics community. I think it's fine. I think there's some issues with it, but I think there's issues with every stat. So just want to include it here and want to include it every week as we look at these matchups, so we get as much information as possible. But EPA per play, the Seahawks offense was 10th in EPA per play. So we just talked about they were 12th in DVOA, 10th in EPA per play. Again, you could call it a top 10 offense if you use that metric. The Broncos defense was 25th in EPA per play. So big advantage there. Again, Seahawks offense versus Broncos defense. The other thing I'll call out, and I mentioned this on Monday, but this is a big one. The Broncos were the second ranked third down defense in the NFL last year. And interestingly, when I broke this down on Monday, they were really good on third and short and third and medium. They were one of the bottom 5 third down defenses on 3rd and 7+. So weird. That's very weird for a blitz heavy team and for a good third down team to be bad in 3rd and long. But it's the truth. And the Seahawks were a pretty awful third down team last year. That's going to have to change. This is going to be where Ryan Grubb's going to have a big influence on this game and on this team. Something to keep an eye on. The other pieces that I'll call out here, so I'm giving you rush EPA as well. You get that right. Well, I can't really highlight it because it's an image, but you get that right here. And the Seahawks were 14th in rush EPA, so a little bit higher than they were in DVOA. Broncos defense was 19th. EPA per drop back, this is for passing, obviously. The Seahawks were 10th in EPA per drop back, and the Broncos were 27th in EPA per drop back as a defense. So again, big advantage in the air, less of an advantage on the ground. And, I think a key to this game is whether the Seahawks offensive line can be good enough to create either a push in the running game or protect Geno long enough for them to move the ball through the air. While I was talking, Lou, one of our members, gifted a Hawk Blogger membership, man. I really appreciate it. And he did what is my favorite thing. He is paying it forward. He got a gifted membership. He is giving a gifted membership. That is how we roll here. That is how we roll to continue to bring in awesome people that take care of each other. And let's remember, it's going to get uglier when the season begins. Not everything's going to go well. Let's not turn the arrows inward. Let's take care of one another and take a break if we need to. But I will need to be reminded of that too, because I get worked up when the Seahawks don't play well. It's just the truth. Last thing I'll say here about when the Seahawks are on offense, keep an eye on this down here, explosive plays. Explosive plays. So Seahawks were 8th in the NFL in explosive passes last year. They really picked up steam in the back half of the year, especially with DK Metcalf and Geno Smith. The Broncos were 26th in the NFL in surrendering explosive passes. They were 26th in the NFL in surrendering explosive rushes. Being able to get big plays against this team is going to be critical. If they're going to still be one of the blitz happiest defenses and that Vance Joseph is still the defensive coordinator, you have got to make them pay for sending an extra defender. This is going to be a game that's going to test Kenneth Walker as a blitz pickup running back. He will get chances. It's going to give Kenneth Walker a chance to be an outlet as a receiver. It's going to give Brady Russell chances, I think, that may be interesting. Laviska Shenault, I think, is going to get some interesting chances in this game because this is a high-risk, high-reward defense that mostly had high-risk, low-reward in 2023. So something to keep an eye on there. Another piece to kind of keep an eye on is Pharaoh Brown. So today is Wednesday. Practice injury reports will come out today. I will be heading over to the VMAC in a few hours to talk to Mike McDonald, potentially some other players, and we'll break it all down for you. I will likely do an instant practice report after that. So keep an eye out. Make sure you click subscribe. We are a couple hundred people away from hitting 12,000 subscribers. Really, really could use every one of you to just head over to YouTube. If you are not watching there, click subscribe. That is 200 away. 12 would be a lucky number for week 1. Let's get there. 200 more people before week 1. And you want to click the bell to get notified because you just don't know when I'm going to go live, because I don't know when I'm going to go live. It just depends on when there's something to talk about, when the press conferences end, all that stuff. So let's talk about the Seahawks defense. when the Broncos are on offense, a lot of this, we're going to see is potentially different relative to Bo Nix being the quarterback instead of Russell Wilson. But I'm not sure how different it's going to be. I mean, Russell Wilson was a highly efficient quarterback last year from a numbers perspective. I think his passer rating was pretty good. His touchdown to interception ratio was excellent. He just was a dink and dunk guy. Well, Bo Nix was a dink and dunk guy in college, and I think he might be a dink and dunk guy in the NFL. So I don't know how different the Broncos offense is going to be. We'll find out. And they did lose their center, who was a very good player. So we'll see. Again, the things that I'll kind of call out for you, the Seahawks defense wasn't very good last year. So as much as we want to kind of crap on the Broncos offense, the Seahawks defense was worse, considerably worse. If you look at the way this sets up. So it hopefully will be very different this year, but that's just a hope at this point. We don't know what the actual result's going to be until we see it on the field. So when you look at this here, I think a couple things are important. When you look at yards per play, by the way, that is a primary stat that bookies in Vegas looks at to set lines. Yards per play has a lot of historical relevance and efficacy for assessing the strength of a team. So the Seahawks were 30th in the NFL in yards per play allowed. The Broncos were 20th in the NFL in yards per play on offense. So that's a meaningful advantage for the Broncos in that stat. If you look at, sorry, I did the wrong numbers. I was down a row. The Seahawks were 24th in the NFL in yards per play, and the Broncos were 25th in yards per play. So there's actually a slight advantage in the yards per play. Apologies for misspeaking there. Seahawks have a slight advantage in yards per play. EPA per play is where I was misreading before. The Seahawks were 30th on defense in EPA per play. The Broncos were 20th on offense. So that's where the Broncos, are given that advantage. And I'm looking now, it's actually the wrong color. I have to go back and fix that. So my little formula there is misset. So I'm going to go back, fix the EPA per play there. That's a new row and it just didn't do it right, but we'll fix it. Third down the Broncos were 21st in the NFL in third down. Seahawks were 30th in third down defense. So again, third down so critical for this team. It's why I've been asking Ryan Grubb about it. It's why I've been asking Mike McDonald about it. Everybody about it. It's such a big deal. This team has to be better on both sides of the ball on third down. I see a not stupid question from one of our members saying, I'm sorry for the stupid question, but what is EPA? EPA is expected points added. And the way EPA works, very, very high level, is wherever you are on the field, it's a field position related stat. There's an expectation of, based on how many yards you gain from that point, your expected points scored either goes up or goes down. And so each play is given a score of whether that added points or subtracted points, expected points from your total. And then over the course of a game, you end up with what is your total expected points added. Negative, bad, positive, good. And I will give a shout out to Ben Baldwin, and he's done a lot of work on this. They have a website. I think it's short for running backs still don't matter. It's rbdsm.com, I think is the right URL. And you can go around and play with EPA rankings on that site. They've done a nice job with it. I think it's a good addition to the NFL, ecosystem, and just want to share that and call that out. All right. So we talked about third down. We talked about EPA and yards per play. Rush EPA, the Broncos were 17th. The Seahawks were 31st. Again, huge advantage. So this is just a big part of this game is, can the Seahawks slow down the Broncos run game? If the Seahawks slow down the Broncos run game, this will not be close. I really don't think this is going to be a close game. if the Broncos are able to run effectively, and I'm not talking they have to get 30, 40 yard runs. If they're running 3 to 4 yards a carry, like if they're getting 4 yards on first down, if it's 2nd and 6, that's a bad sign for Seattle. That is a very good sign for Denver. So first down is going to be key. Keeping them to 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, that would be the good sign. These are things I pay attention to every single game, every single series. When everyone else is like, oh, that's just a little short run, I'm looking up and seeing, was that a 3-yard run, a 4-yard run? Because it's a big difference. Was that a 2-yard run or a 3-yard run? That's a big difference. And it really has a big impact. And that's, by the way, DVOA factors in success rate. If you want to know a little bit more about success rate also is saying, you need to get this many yards on first down to be successful. You need to get this many yards on second down. And then obviously converting on third down is successful. And that's how success rate works without getting into all the nitty gritty. Basically, if you get 3 to 4 yards on first down, that's success. And if you get 3 to 4 yards on second down, that's success. So it really comes down to, can you keep teams to 2 yards or less on these initial downs? It's not easy to do. And the Seahawks were not good at it last year. They hopefully will be better at it this year. All right, continuing on, EPA per dropbacks, another one I did not cover on Monday, so I just want to cover that here. The Broncos offense was 21st in EPA per dropback. The Seahawks defense was 29th. So again, not great for the Seahawks defense on anything pretty much. There's not a lot to be excited about for the Seahawks defense. And these green markers you see around around EPA are all actually should be red. So this should be like a lot of red. The advantages for the Seahawks defense in this really are just passing yards allowed, yards per play by a little narrow margin, and then sack rate. The Seahawks had the 13th best sack rate in the NFL. The Broncos gave up the 27th most sacks as a percentage of dropbacks. I think that might be different this year with Bo Nix, who has elite sack avoidance. At least he did in college, but we'll see. We will see. Special teams. I want to spend a couple moments on this. So Seahawks were, Jason Myers was not good last year. He's 21st in the NFL in accuracy, 21st in the NFL in 50-plus yard field goals. The Broncos were 13th in the NFL in accuracy, but they did have fewer long field goals. From a kicking perspective, the Seahawks were second. Michael Dixon was second in the NFL in net yards per punt. The Broncos were the number 1 ranked punt return unit in the league. So this is the only team that would be ranked higher than the Seahawks punt and coverage units. So keep an eye out. The Broncos were first in the NFL in punt returns. They were 8th in the NFL in kick returns. So this has been a very good return group for the Broncos. Part of the way, if you want a formula for how an underdog upsets in an away game, it is if you can get some big special teams plays. So keep an eye on that, because the Seahawks coverage groups were maybe the only part of the preseason that did not perform well. They gave up a number of big returns, and Jay Harbaugh's got to prove that they can be a more solid team. Now you're going to have more experienced guys getting more focused reps, so hopefully that'll help. But just something to keep an eye on as we head into this game. As far as the Seahawks, they were 8th in the NFL in yards per punt and 3rd in the NFL in kick returns with DJ Dallas. Obviously, D. Williams is a guy that has a lot more to offer there, but he also is going to be in his first NFL game, and he could have the jitters. Is he going to be secure with the ball? Those are things that I will be paying attention to. So, I think special teams is, maybe roughly even in this one. And we'll see if that ends up being a factor or not. I think it's a lesser factor in general than the Seahawks run defense, the Broncos run offense, and the Seahawks pass protection. If they are able to give Geno Smith a little bit of time. I think that's huge. I think if Ryan Grubb and Geno Smith come into this game with the mindset that they did, well, at least that Geno did in the Dallas game from last year, where they were getting rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds. It was like coming out fast. If they're involving Laviska Shenault in end arounds, in screens, if they're getting the ball to JSN on quick passes, if they are being quick and then also looking for chances to be explosive, I think it's going to be hard on the Broncos. I think that will be hard on them. I don't think they have the speed or the strength on the perimeter to defend the Seahawks receivers. And everyone thinks, oh, Riley Moss against, these guys, he can't cover them. For me, I look at Riley Moss and I'm like, well, Riley Moss is, he's 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. How is he going to be in run support? Like, how is he going to be tackling Laviska Shenault? How is he going to be if he's getting blocked by Laviska Shenault? And I have some real questions there about this Broncos group. I want to actually pull up size. I haven't looked at this yet. So this is where I start wandering, folks. PJ Locke is one of their safeties, 200 pounds, 5'10". Brandon Jones is another safety. He's light, 190 pounds. Jaquan McMillian, I think it's McMillian, by the way, because there is an extra I after the L. He is 5'10", 180. Alex Singleton is 240. Cody Barton, we know, is not great. He's 237. You've got a lot of guys that are, Baron Browning's 240. Jonathan Cooper, he's like 250. This is a light Broncos team. And so what I'm thinking about if I'm Ryan Grubb is I am putting my guys on the perimeter and I am making the Broncos crew tackle. It's not even about coverage. It is, we're going to put guys on the perimeter. We're going to get it to Kenneth Walker. We're elite tackle breaker and tackle avoider. We're going to get it to Zach Charbonnet. We're going to get it to Noah Fant, who's a great yard after catch guy. We're going to get it to Laviska Shenault. All these guys, Jake Bobo, they're going to have to contend. I've been talking about that. I've been hammering this, that the Seahawks, between Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, Derek Young, have one of the most physical wide receiver groups they have ever put on the field. And I think this is a great game to actually show that off. I think it can be a dink and dunk game where it needs to be. And then Geno's going to be able to move the ball downfield and hit the great passes that he normally hits. But I see someone saying, don't forget DK. 100%. DK goes without saying, but I think that DK is going to be asked to do different things. If DK is primarily being asked to be a blocker or to create space for other players, then I think Ryan Grubb isn't doing his job. I think Laviska Shenault, Derek Young, these guys, like, a big part of their jobs is going to be physical out there and to hit guys both with the ball in their hands and without. I think that Jake Bobo, that is one of the biggest things he brings. So I think those guys have a chance to be a bigger part of this game plan than most people realize. I don't think anybody else anywhere is going to say Laviska Shenault is a key part of this game. I am telling you, he should be a key part of this game. I think he could be a difference maker in this game. I can't wait. He's like one of the guys I'm most excited to watch play in this game because I think there's something special brewing there. I love that he got number 1, by the way. I think it looks great on him, and I think he's going to represent it well. And then otherwise, like, I think Brady Russell is a sneaky guy in this game, man. I think Brady Russell, assuming Pharaoh Brown does not play, which we won't know. I'm not going to like declare him out or anything. We'll see what happens in the practice report today. He absolutely could be back today or tomorrow and get snaps in this game. But if he doesn't, I think Brady, even if he does, honestly, I think Brady Russell is going to get big snaps. I think we're going to see Brady Russell at fullback. That is not a report. I'm not saying anything, but that's just, I think they're going to start using him out of the backfield to get him on the field. I think to get him as a blocker, to get him out in different patterns. I'm really excited about Brady Russell. And not just because I love his vibe and I love how fun he is. I think he could be really good. Like, I think he could be really good. And I think we could be very happy that we have him on the team, not to be able to, not just because he's fun, but because he's going to be productive. So, yeah, I think a lot of those guys could play as factors. And this has been reported, so I can't say it. Ryan Grubb has been lining up all sorts of guys in the backfield, including receivers. So I think you're going to potentially see that. I think it's going to give the Broncos linebackers headaches. If they have DK Metcalf lined up in the backfield and he then runs a route, who's covering there? Like, how's that going to work? If they don't want Pat Surtain to be able to fixate on DK Metcalf, we're going to see how Ryan Grubb does in creating matchups that he likes and dictating matchups instead of having to wait for, the right guy to just happen to be on DK. So I really am hopeful about the matchups for the Seahawks on offense. I think I'm most positive in those. Defensively, I think the Broncos have a chance to run the ball. And that's the part that I need to see before I feel confident about. And we'll see how Draymond Jones does in this game. I think he is a sneaky big factor. Revenge game for him, revenge game for Noah Fant. We will see if those guys play a role. Part of the reason Draymond Jones is moved to edge was to help in run defense, to be more stout in run defense. Assuming Uchenna Nwosu cannot play, having someone like Draymond Jones as an edge setter is a big deal. Derek Hall is going to likely get significant snaps in this game. He will be a big factor in this. Can he be more than a preseason flash? I think he can. We're going to find out in a few days. Now, the Broncos have two offensive tackles, one of them in Garrett Bowles, who's very good, and he's going to make it hard for whoever's across from him. I wouldn't expect whoever's going against Garrett Bowles to do that well as a pass rusher. He's that good of a pass protector. Mike McGlinchey's not that good of a pass protector, and he was called for more false starts than all but like 3 or 4 offensive tackles last year, and he's coming into Lumen Field. So will we be able to get some false starts, some jitters there? Will the games, the twists and stunts between Boye Mafe and Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams, I think these guys can potentially cause a lot of chaos. I think Ben Powers is also not a good guard. So you've got a couple duos that I'm interested in. McGlinchey, I don't think is that great at right tackle. And then Ben Powers and Wattenberg are not great at center. Powers plays left guard and Wattenberg plays center. So I think that this potential to try to blow up the left interior part of the line with Jaron Reed, with Leonard Williams, with Byron Murphy, often with Draymond Jones doing it. Like Draymond Jones, if he's going against Garrett Bowles, I think there's a lot of times he's going to really be going against Ben Powers, because you're going to see Jaron Reed or Jonathan Hankins, whoever, blow into Ben Powers, the left guard, push out Garrett Bowles, and for Draymond Jones to loop around and to have either Wattenberg or Powers to go against. I like that matchup, and I think he does too. So I think that is a weakness for this Broncos unit. If they're able to run the ball, if Bo Nix is able to use his legs, that's going to be the thing that could frustrate. Like, that's the thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing Reek Woolen go up against Courtland Sutton. I hope that they have him travel with Courtland Sutton, because I don't think that they have other receivers that can hurt you if Woolen shuts down Sutton. Sutton is an excellent route runner. He's got great hands. This is the type of receiver that Woolen can prove he can now cover in a way that maybe he wasn't as good at in past years. So I really, really think that could be a big first game for Riq Woolen. And Devin Witherspoon, I think, is going to give them a lot of problems, because one of the other things I put in the tail of the tape on hawkblogger.com is that the Broncos running backs are not good in pass protection. Javonte Williams had a 27.8 pass block grade last year. Jaleel McLaughlin had a 34.6 pass block grade last year. So if you can get Devin Witherspoon isolated on those guys, good friggin' luck. That is going to be a nightmare for the Broncos coming into this game. So I don't envy Bo Nix in this situation. I think he's well equipped because he is, played 60 starts in college. He's an older rookie. He's played in big games, in big stadiums. He's been good at sack avoidance. He's been good at interception avoidance. So there's a lot of things. He's got Sean Payton calling plays. There'll probably be a lot of, short average depth of target. That's what ADOT is, if you've ever wondered. Short dink and dunk kind of stuff. I don't envy him. I think Mike McDonald, his style of defense is one of the most frustrating and tough to prepare for as a quarterback. For your first ever NFL start to come on the road against that defense with these playmakers, it should be a nightmare for him. It really should be. And I think that's why the line is moved to 6 points. That's why it's moved that high. If you remember, when we did the show yesterday with Mike Randall, we were talking about that. Rookie quarterbacks just do not do well. And so that is a good reminder, by the way. If you haven't already gone to ftnfantasy.com, use promo code HAWKS. Now's your chance. I am a subscriber. Join me over there. Use promo code HAWKS, get 15% off. You want to make sure that you get the Fantasy Plus subscription. That gets you Stats Hub. That gets you access to all the DVOA data. That gets you access to, the Discord channel where you can ask questions about your lineup. You can ask questions about bets that you're making, all sorts of stuff. So head on over to ftnfantasy.com, promo code HAWKS. All right, folks. I think I'm going to leave it there. I could keep going. There's a few members I want to acknowledge. Knix joins. Thank you for joining as a new member. It was super happy to have you. Welcome to the crew. Falcon Sprinkle. I like that name. Welcome as a new member. Really, really great to have you here. And I honestly, I could just keep going. I won't, because I'm going to be on later and it's a long day and you guys will get sick of it. But I look at PFF grades. I look at every different way to assess this matchup. And from what I can see and from what I can surmise, it's going to come down to whether the Broncos can run the ball, whether the Seahawks can stop the run, same thing, and whether the Seahawks are able to either establish the run themselves or move the ball through the air. Now that might sound all very obvious, but I think that knowing that, I'll be more specific on the air part. Knowing that the Broncos are a blitz-heavy team, are the Seahawks able to have an answer for those blitzes? Do they have quick passes? Do they have jet sweeps that make this a horizontal, not just a vertical game? Can they get explosives when the Broncos take a chance with a blitz? So that's what I mean when moving the ball in the air. I think those specific things and an answer to those blitzes. This is a team that blitzed over a third of the time. Over a third of the snaps were blitzes. They were also one of the worst pressure teams. So even though they blitzed a lot, they did not create a lot of pressure last year. And I mean, it is hard to make a case that the Broncos are the better team. It's hard to make a case the Broncos should win here. You heard Susie Wargin earlier, saying she's picking the Broncos. Of course, she works for Broncos Radio. I wouldn't expect anything less. Broncos fans are feeling very confident. They're very excited about Bo Nix. You know, I wouldn't say good luck to them because I don't mean it. I think it's gonna be tough. And I don't get overconfident going into these things. First games of the season, I've been a Seahawks fan for a very long time. They're often frustrating. They're often disappointing. Like for years, even the 2013 Super Bowl year, the Seahawks started in Carolina. They needed a late Jermaine Kearse touchdown to win that game. In the 2005 Super Bowl season, it started, I think, in Jacksonville. They lost that game. So it can be really rough, you know, even for teams that have had the same coach for a few years and the same system and some of the same players, it still can be rough on that first day. So anyone dreaming of like a 45-13 or 43-8 repeat, probably not in the cards. If it happens, awesome. But this is probably going to be a little bit closer than that. It's probably not going to be as clean as we want it to be. But I think within the margin of error, still feel like the Seahawks should be a comfortable victor in this game. By how much? You'll have to tune in to Real Hawk Talk tonight at 6 o'clock to hear my score prediction, as well as Nathan Ernst and Dana O'Gorman. That'll be 6 p.m. Pacific time. Also, make sure you haven't subscribed and liked and clicked the bell to be notified. Do it now because I will likely do a report after Mike McDonald does his press conference, after I get a chance to talk to some of the players. I think we're getting locker room time today, so first time I've done locker room. I have no idea what that's going to be like, so wish me luck. I'll keep you guys informed about all of it. Welcome to all the new members, and thank you to everybody that gifted a new membership. I really, really appreciate all of you. We're getting closer, folks. Just a few more days. Take care. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. By the way, open up Instagram, click follow real quick. Would appreciate that. This has been episode 164 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.